I am delighted to welcome my guest, Mike D, to the show. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you.
Oh, fantastic to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. You're going to be taking us to the Desert Island Disco, and we were just talking about it off air. A challenge which is both delightful and terrible.
What were your words? Yeah, delightful and terrible, which I think is, for me, is very accurate because, I mean, one of the reasons, honestly, I agreed to do this show is I was like, oh, great. There's nothing I love to do more in my life than to share music that I love and is important to me with other people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would take about, like I said earlier, about 1,008 songs or so, and we're just playing, what are we playing? 5 or 6.
Exactly, so, the pleasure and the pain. We're going to embrace both and just go with it. So obviously, Desert Island Disco is all about kind of, I guess, a party and creating a vibe. I wondered about that for you, someone who has played out, who's remixed, who's obviously been an artist and DJ'd and all sorts of other ways of, like you say, sharing music. How much has that changed over the years for you? Like what you're after in a sort of night out, in a party?
Well, I think two things. I think one thing stays the same is that, from really a young age, and it stays totally consistent to like that, who I am now, is there's virtually nothing more exciting. I don't say nothing, my girlfriend might take this the wrong way, but there's very little that's more exciting to me in life than just hearing a new piece of music that I love. And that can be old and new to me, or that can be completely new, and that moment of discovery is just kind of that's paramount, right?
I love that, and that's never waned with you, because I think for some people they kind of have that when they're young, and certainly when I was growing up, you sort of assumed, or I assumed, I guess I was taught that you would have that when you were a teenager, but then it would sort of wear off, and for me it just never did, and obviously for you either.
Yeah, maybe I'll grow up one day. It is possible, but yeah. So that's the thing, and then I think that's also the amazing. That's what is so amazing about music, right? I can go back, like some of the music we're going to play today. I can go back and discover something that came out decades ago.
Exactly,
and they can blow my mind. There's
always more to discover. So tell me about it then, this new edition of Mr. Bongo's Brazil 45 box set. How did it come about, this project?
Well, it came, I don't know, come about. I think it was because the brazen owner of Mr. Bongo himself, asked me if I would be interested in doing it.
So was this after the Nissadia remix that you did?
Yeah, I did that. That came first because I loved, that was a track I loved. And unfortunately, we're not going to be playing, we'll say we're unfortunately not playing some African music that's very important to me, but that was from a
Malian artist.
Yeah, because I was going to say I love music from Mali. I mean, also music from Ghana, also music from Lagos, also, a lot of places. But anyway, there's so much Brazilian music that really permeates my household. Like I have two sons they're 20 and 18, and it's hard to explain, but they've grown up and they're like they do music as well, and their harmonies are as informed from groups like Quarteto MC, like these Brazilian harmonies, as they are by like Beach Boys and and other things.
What about your discovery of that genre of music? I wondered whether you must have heard it growing up in New York.
It's what I did not hear Brazilian music growing up in New York. We heard a lot. I mean, we'd hear salsa, we'd hear funk, we'd hear soul, we'd hear, obviously rap music, but there was a lot of Latin music. But Brazil, I don't know if there wasn't that much of or I wasn't that in touch with the Brazilian population, but it wasn't part. It was really like when we were as a band in the record making process. And to give a shout out to Mario Caldato, Mario C, who worked as an engineer and co-producer with us. Yeah, he genuinely likes to keep it clean. So Mario C is half Brazilian, and he helped us also discover a lot of. I think our gateway into a lot of Brazilian music, maybe at first, was some of the more psych-oriented stuff like Os Mutantes.
Okay, yeah.
And then
and things like that.
Yeah, totally. Okay. And then we just. I think, like I said, anything Brazilian music, it's such a joy and discovery we were bitten by the bug.
So tell us a little bit about this collection, this golden era of Brazilian music, and your choices here. We'll play a couple of the bands, the Hareton Salvanini and the Erasmo Carlos. Can you tell us anything about these two tunes before we go?
Just for me, what attracted to me, starting with, Hareton Salvanini.
Salvanini, I'm sorry.
I said it correctly. It may as well be like, that's one of those records that may as well have been made on the moon or Mars, or it's not from another part of the world, it's from another planet, and I say that in the absolute best way, right? It's like inconceivable, like the horn arrangement and the stringer, everything on it is just, to me, I am left with like my jaw dropped and thinking, how did they think of this part? How did they think of that part? How did they put this part together with that part?
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get started. We're off to the Desert Island Disco with my guest, Mike D. Keep it here on Six Music. This is Hareton Salvanini.
Eu cheguei de muito longe.
Erasmo Carlos at the Desert Island Disco.
Six Music. The Desert Island Disco.
With my castaway today, Mike D. Two brilliant selections, both of which might feature on this Mr. Bongo Brazil 45 collection that you've put together. Fantastic music. I was just saying that Erasmo Carlos track that we just heard, that's got flavours of Portishead for me, just a little, that kind of Sour Times.
Yeah, well, it is like that Portishead. What's the sample?
Sour Times, I think. Oh, the original sample.
Yeah, it's...
Now you're asking. It'll come back to us. The listeners will sort us out. They'll tell us. They can check. But absolutely, it just has that sound that, we were talking about that sense of discovery, finding a new place, finding a new sound, and you can kind of move laterally backwards in time as well as forwards. But you do hear kind of resonances of the music that you love wherever you go.
Yeah. And Erasmo Carlos is a good example of I discovered this record through a friend of mine who's a fellow musician, and he was just over at our studio doing a session, and somehow, I don't know, like for me anyway, at my current age, I don't. Well, actually, it's always been like that. Like the work part of music, and then it just kind of rolls over into the social part, and so it's always been very organic. Like you go from like recording something, and then you take a break and you're eating something, and then you start playing each other. You start sharing music basically with each other. And so, and that's, to me, still one of the main ways I discover.
I wanted to ask
music.
about that, because obviously in recent years it sounds like you're just doing this really interesting mix of things. Quite recent remixes, obviously quite a lot of that. And I wondered about being in the studio. Does it feel the same as kind of working on a record of your own back in the day? It sounds like your approach is quite similar throughout.
Yeah, well, it's funny, and it's if I'm going to shout out Dave, Mr. Bongo, who's here in the studio with us, because he's witnessed it. He's come by my Los Angeles compound, and so he sees how it is, because now my kids are making records all the time. So it's like that. It's just this thing of there's always something happening, and that creative wise, there's always something creative happening, and then that kind of just rolls over into
other
everyday
things.
life. But that's kind of, that's sort of what I feel very grateful. That's what I've chosen for.
And I love that description of sociability, that you had that kind of convivial atmosphere where people can drop in and kind of share something, and then you're eating something, and then everybody's talking and telling stories. And actually that brings me to the book, which I wanted to ask about. 2018 that came out, and then the fantastic kind of film project that followed it, obviously, with Spike Jonze working on it. It wasn't a traditional music documentary.
Well, none of it was traditional.
None of it was traditional.
Or the shows or the film or any of it.
But the book kind of had that, because it was, your thoughts, obviously your essays, but also essays from friends, people who were there bringing their perspective to the Beastie Boys story. Why did you want to approach it that way?
Well, I think two things. One, when Adam and I first got together, and I honestly, actually, in our first, we have there's probably like two entire scrapped manuscripts that we sort of tried to do that we're like, all right, this isn't what we want to do at all. And one of them was actually because I think we were so sad after Adam Yauch had died that we originally, the very first version of the book was kind of like an oral history told by other people, or not other people, but people that we thought were like kind of around the band. And we realized, maybe this is a book that can come out for some reason by somebody else, but it's not us. So there's no point, this is not our story, and we need to take this opportunity to kind of get our story out there. And then I think, I don't know, just like, then we became sort of more comfortable in our own voice. Like, honestly, it took like some time of just getting through the grieving of Adam's death. Yeah. And then I think we got to this point where we were able to start, really writing on our own. But then we quickly realized in that there's like, that's where it was like a lot like making any of the records we've made, where we're like, all right, I quickly read like maybe 3 or 4 music biographies, and I was like, I absolutely do not want to do that. And it's no slight to that, but it's like it's like, how do we do something that's completely unlike anything else that's been done before? And really what we hit upon was that we want to explain this world that was a really unique time and a really unique place in the world, which is New York City, in the time that we grew up, in the 70s into the 80s into the 90s, and that it's just trying to get all of the total chaos, anarchy, musical inspiration, visual art inspiration, life inspiration, like kind of in that. And so to explain it, what we realized is, from both Adam and I think to give Adam Horvitz, the King Ad Rock, the credit. I remember one day we were getting together, and we'd write on our own, then we'd get together and kind of download with each other. And he was like, "Look, we're not. Neither you or I are writers, but we can explain that we can tell things. We can talk like what you said in this. What was your word? Convivial. I like that word. I need to use it more. In our convivial way, we're used to sharing stories about things. So we can speak in short stories, and that works for us.
It's so brilliant. And you do that so wonderfully. The lovely thing about it is that the whole book, to me, read, in the round, it is kind of a tribute to Yauch. You evoke the time so well, and your relationship with the people, everything from like, 1 minute you're handling a rat problem in your apartment in like your own unique way, to the next you're at Danceteria, and I think Ad Rock is like 16, and someone plays Laid Back, White Horse, and he gets really scared of the music. Yeah. And you just sort of, like you say, those things that are so particular to your story, they're stories like nobody else could tell. And so much of it is funny, but also some of it's really touching and raw. I'm thinking about Kate Schellenbach, your essay about when she left the band, the Beastie Boys, and then she has her own essay after that, which is beautiful. It's just one of the best in the book. I love that was included.
Yeah, it felt really nice to be able to kind of give Kate her voice on that, because, that's sort of like that's a part of our history that's not really often told or ever reflected on. Yeah. And, I guess Adam and I felt really grateful to be, it's nice to be able to acknowledge sort of like, all right, we were kids and we didn't handle things well, and which is what happens to all of us. Of course, in life.
Absolutely. And also, since the publication of the book, we've lost many other musical legends, including Lee Scratch Perry. And I have to say, the day he died, I thought about the story of you, the mental image of the three of you trying to secrete him in the streets of New York City and sneak him out of your studio, I think it was.
Yeah, so it was well, yes. It was Halloween, and then where the studio we were working at was in the midst of, like, blocks away from, in New York City, we have there's a Halloween parade every year, which is like the epicenter, for decades now. It's like the epicenter of kind of like queer culture. That parade is like, been way before that was part of the mainstream, before, that could be part of mainstream dialogue that was happening in Lower Manhattan. And so anyway, we had to go to where Lee Scratch Perry was staying, bring him to the studio, and then get him to where he was playing later that night. It was almost like kind of like a reality TV show, basically. and this in, a city of millions of people, right through the busiest part of the city at night with Halloween. But the amazing thing how it worked out. And so, the hardest part, we're talking to his tour manager, and they're like, okay, well, what time's the car coming? And we're like, well, we're really, really sorry, but we can send a car, but the car literally couldn't get to where we were because of the parade route.
Yeah.
And so it was just literally impossible. So we're like, we can't send a car for Mr. Perry. Really, really sorry, but we can come and get him. And, we know how so we literally had to go get him at this hotel, get on the train with him, and then walk through massive
Halloween
parading.
Carnival.
Yeah. Basically, it is a lot like Carnival, through humanity. And then the amazing thing was, it's Lee Scratch Perry, so he's got his dyed beard, and he's got mirrors all over his hat and mirrors all over his shoes, and so literally not a single person gave a single look at any of us, because it's just was normal on that night.
Thank God for New York City.
Yeah.
Listen, speaking of New York, I'm going to play a couple more tracks from your Desert Island Disco selection.
Can I just while we're on Lee Scratch Perry, I did originally have a Lee Scratch Perry song on the track list, which I understand had certain language in it, which is unacceptable on your
understood.
The Queen's airwaves, soon to be the King's airwaves.
But we are going to play some classic hip hop now, which takes us back to New York
just wanted to shout out that we, because we did have a thing of literally, Lee Scratch Perry was a huge influence for us, and we would show up at the studio. I remember, more than almost any other artist, we'd show up at our studio when we were working in California, and at that time, music equipment is a little archaic, or quickly becomes outdated. But at that time, we were using these samplers. You had to format the floppy disks. Okay. I'm bringing up a lot of archaic language.
Don't worry, you're talking to the right crowd.
Floppy disks don't exist anymore.
Talking to the right crowd. 6 music listeners.
But that was the whole process. I remember I'd get in the afternoon. I'd start formatting disks. I'd make a pot of coffee, and then I would start breaking down and rolling up an illicit substance.
I'm assuming you're talking about dub. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So,
and then by the time I'd put on usually more times than any other an Upsetter or Lee Scratch Perry production, and that would be the soundtrack, and then.
And he gave you your shout out, the Beastly Boys with their beastly toys.
Yeah.
It must have been so good to hear that. So, Mike, I'm going to play a few more tracks because I want to get these tunes away from your Desert Island Disco selection. And since we're going into some hip hop, it's the 50th anniversary of what is widely considered to be the birth of the genre this August. It's coming up, the party in the Bronx that kicked it all off, August the 11th, 1973. And so much has changed. Hip hop's changed our culture, the way we protest, our art, everything. Do you think that the genre is in good health now?
Oh God, I don't want to be a spokesperson or a critic of the genre. I don't really think about the dates in terms of the history of rap music. But it's amazing to me. I went last night. I dropped by to see the Beyond the Streets
exhibition. We just had the curator on the show earlier.
Oh, Roger. Yeah. So I went by to say hi to Roger and check it out last night.
At the Saatchi Gallery.
At the Saatchi Gallery here in London. Anyway, but it was, it's amazing when seeing things like that where I lose sight of the historical impact. And I do think it's very interesting because, I'm still old enough that when we first came, say, here to Britain, and we were first doing interviews, right, as a, 18, 19-year-old band and being rappers, practically every interview would be, well, when's this going to end? Not meaning so much when we're going to end, but when is rap music going to end? When is this as a fad? When's it going to be done? Mm-hmm. And why people ask that, I could go into it. That could be a whole separate show. But anyway, but the fact that now here we are, now we're at 50 years and no one, I feel like that noise, that critic that everybody had is gone is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. All right. With that in mind, next few tracks from your Desert Island Disco selection, Mike D. And up first is Public Enemy and Rebel Without a Pause.
Yes, the rhythm's a rebel. Without a pause, I'm lowering my level. That's right. We showing up in EFFEC.
Greetings, girl, and welcome to my world of phrasing right up to bat. Is the daisy...
You need some love.
Aretha Franklin, Precious Lord, Take My Hand, live at New Temple from the selections of my guest at the Desert Island Disco, Mike D, who's still with me. So, Mike, we just heard Public Enemy, Rebel Without a Pause, De La Soul, I Know, and now Aretha. This track, this last one, that's from a concert where the footage was lost for many years.
A film. It came out, I'm trying to remember, it was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
It was pre-lockdown, but only just.
Yeah, exactly. And it was an incredible film.
Yeah.
Also edited by the same editor who edited our film. Anyway, but it was an interesting story because the film was shot and then the footage, I guess, just sat for literally decades. And I watched the film, I cried because her performance is so incredible. And I especially picked this song because it's a Carole King, it's her interpretation of a Carole King song. And so truthfully, Carole King as a songwriter is someone who I hold like the top. And growing up, like Carole King Tapestries was such a huge album for me. And then still with like my kids, they love, like I think they rate like Carole King as the absolute top in terms of songwriter and melody. They rank her.
So that's a
top.
Lovely mix of all of those.
So
things.
So you got Aretha and Carole King on one track. So
and Steely Dan and De La Soul on the one before it.
Yeah. Well, I think, so if I could say the thing about the De La track, like we were making an album called Paul's Boutique, and when we were getting towards the end of working on the record, I guess we got in advance of De La Soul's of 3 Feet High and Rising, and so thank goodness, I'll give them a shout out that it's back in print, back on streaming now and in print, and thank goodness, because it really is like, a very, very important hip-hop album.
What was it like when you heard that? Working on your own album?
We were working on Paul's Boutique, we were finishing up, and already like plug tuning, some of the singles had come out, so we were really excited to hear the 3 Feet High and Rising album, and it was like this thing of like, we loved it so much, and it was the most heartbreaking thing ever because we had heard it and we were like, I was going to say a bad word, but I won't. We were like, holy F-bomb. We were supposed to make this record. Like, they did it. This was our idea. Like, and they did it. And then, we were really deflated, and Paul's Boutique came out however months later, but I think we did it. Ultimately, we had our little lane and they had theirs. But that it really was this feeling of like, wow, they completely did it and crushed it. And then another record that we had the same feeling about at the same time was Public Enemy, the Nation of Millions album. And so to shout out both like Chuck, Hank Shockley, Keith Shockley, Bill Stephanie, the whole Bomb Squad crew, Eric Vietnam Sadler, the whole Bomb Squad crew. I think production-wise, what Public Enemy did, you were talking earlier about the activism, the sort of the political side of
the nature of protest,
and what Public Enemy did, which is incredible. And I'm not trying to take anything away from it. And Chuck is an amazing spokesperson for it, but I feel like it's really, really important to note the true revolution that the production brought on in music. It was like it was like a couple of years later that you had like Dallas Austin making pop records that were like densely layered because he was trying to do like what the Bomb Squad were doing, so it really was impactful and really blew our minds away.
I want to ask you about your next track, Mike, because it takes us back to New York City again and ESG. Mm-hmm. Would you have been aware of them growing up? I mean, there must have been a lot of danceteria and stuff like that. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, like us being we were literally kids, or teenagers, young teenagers growing up in nightclubs.
We were off air when I was saying that. My favourite bit in the book when Adrock is hearing "Laid Back White Horse" in the danceteria, and he's scared of the music because it's so weird. I totally related to that. As someone who was in a band a bit too young, I got that.
But ESG was like a band that you'd hear this song that we're about to play, dance in the clubs. You'd also you'd hear Moody, you'd hear other UFO. You'd hear different ESG tracks, and they would play sometimes at Danceteria. Still one of like more amazing live shows I ever seen was ESG playing at Danceteria. But anyway, it was just like that. ESG was like this group where, again, it may as well be from Mars or another planet. It didn't sound like anything else yet. In New York City at the time, it made total sense. It was hip hop. It like touched on Latin. It was dance music. It was everything.
And a girl group too.
Yeah, really powerful. And all women that were making music that not like anything else at all.
Absolutely. I always say, if you've got a band named after their birthstones, there are some pretty powerful teenage girl energy in there as well, which I love. It's a whole thing on its own. This is ESG and Dance. ESG at the Desert Island Disco with Lauren Laverne, my guest Mike D. Thank you so much for choosing your tunes today, Mike. It's been phenomenal.
Thank you, and I'm going to walk away happy and profoundly sad that we didn't get to.
There's no Nina Simone in there.
The 12,000 other songs I wanted to play. Yeah, no Nina Simone, no Fela Kuti, no Zamrock, none of the millions of Brazilian songs I wanted to play. No Witch, yeah, exactly. I could go on and on.
Well, look, maybe
and for that, we had to cut. Actually, also the punk music that was super important to me. Like I had the Slits. I even with before the list I gave you, I was like, how can I not play a song by the Clash? So there was a lot.
Well, you know what? You're just going to have to do a show on Six Music. This is what happened to Iggy Pop. He came in as a guest, and then he just. And
I left with a job. Great.
I know you've got a lot on your plate there, but maybe there's another 7-inch box set in your future. The Mr. Bongo collection, that's out for Record Store Day coming up. Okay, fantastic.
Correct.
And what else is coming up for you guys? You mentioned that your sons are making music now. Can you tell us anything about what their plans are in their future?
They have a band called Very Nice Person, so that'll be
that's such a good name.
But yeah, they'll be dropping tracks coming up. What else I've been working on? I don't know. Couple things that I'm not supposed to talk about yet.
Okay.
And then and then just onwards and upwards of just trying to do creative things that I care about.
Well, listen, as long as you've got irons in the fire, we are very happy. One more tune to play, Mike. One final track. It's going to be Tigre, Deceptacon. I think this kind of covers the punk remit. Tell me why you.
Well, a little bit, because I think what's great what Kathleen or the Tigre did, and shout out Kathleen Hanna, but especially with this track and this band is, she obviously came from Bikini Kill. Great documentary on her called The Punk Singer.
So good.
And it's funny you mentioned off air.
My band.
Your band.
We only started a band after we heard Riot.
Yeah.
Like, we just like music.
No, but I was going to say, I remember on Hello Nasty when we came here, because we were so, or at least I was like so struck by like Bikini Kill, Huggy Bear, like these, like that whole time. It was very important to me, and really, it raised a lot of, I don't know, I just was unaware of things before that. Anyway, but with this track, they just, Le Tigre land the plane because they combine. It's like, I feel like they kind of combine punk and ESG and dance music. It's all in one, and pop music,
and changing the conversation too. Absolutely, as you say. Off air, I was telling Mike a very long story.
Right,
at the time, my band presented the Beastie Boys with a baton from Venom's Drumsticks at Reading Festival back in 1998 or something like that, which we can't go into on air for various reasons. Mike D, my guest today. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you for having me.
Cheers.